Dom and Johnny. So close. Dom and Johnny in the morning. Okay. So I thought that today would be a good day to talk about weapons training and how weapons training relates to martial arts training, especially because there are both weapons that we train in our school that are modern weapons, so things like defense against knives and firearms, and also more traditional weapons, so the farming implements like kama, sai, bow staff, the ones that you see the Ninja Turtles using. I guess the big question is, what is the value of weapons training, and is there an area that, like, an interested student should focus more of their time on?
I think I'm very opinionated about this one because I really like weapons, but I don't like if they're a detriment to how you move. I've actually seen instructors before, like, have students try and modify current, kata, with weapons in their hands, which is always an interesting drill. Because I think at least in that instance, you're teaching yourself how to do Shaolin Kempo with that extra extension on your body. And I think a lot of the times when we do weapons training, it's usually adopting another style, which I think is pretty cool too. It's cool to get a little taste of these different styles. But I think what I always wish there was, and there really doesn't seem to be, is Shaolin Kempo weapons forms.
Yeah. Well, if you think about the lineage of, Fred Villari was the one who codified the curriculum in the way he saw fit for, how most efficiently to teach someone self-defense. Master Graposo said that he was interested mostly in modern weapons because, although swords are cool, pretty unlikely that, someone's going to trespass into your house with a katana, or a pair of sai. Anything is possible. But, when you're thinking about, like, if you're looking at it purely probability, it's probably going to be, a club, which is some kind of stick, an edged weapon, or a firearm. So if you're going to spend a lot of your training from, like, that practical perspective, those are the things you're going to want to familiarize yourself with. So it makes sense that there's not a lot of traditional weapon kata, because I can see from his perspective, from what I know of him from having spoken to people who knew him, it just seemed like a distraction from the point.
Yeah. And then ironically, he taught a Musashi form. He taught a katana form. He called the Musashi form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and, you always have some things in your back pocket. I'm sure that was, like, at a clinic or something, right? Where...
No, Master Graposo said he straight up taught that form. That was, like, one of his forms he taught.
Oh, that's... I've never heard that, so that's interesting.
Yeah, I would love to see it. I don't think, like, it wasn't a form, obviously, from Musashi.
Right.
But it was a form based on principles of Musashi.
Well, and that's the other thing is, I guess, if you're looking at a Shaolin Kempo karate weapons form, I would imagine it would be on a syllabus somewhere. Because, there are resources. Like, there's a poster I'm thinking of that's got like a Buddha background, and it's, like, basically listing out what the curriculum is. That curriculum, at least in our area, has been trimmed down over time. Because from what I'm told, there were some curriculum pieces that were just kind of either redundant or impractical to practice. I do know some Villari schools teach the two-man fist set. I've never seen it or learned it. But part of from a principal's perspective, I was told that it could be seen as redundant. And from a practical training perspective, you need two people to practice it. So it's hard if you don't have, a partner. It's easy to forget. So
yeah, and I think it's like the story with the Ninglese. People are working so hard to get the two sides to line up.
Yeah.
That it's no longer about producing power and being effective. It's It's this foot has to land at the right time so that he catches my punch with this block.
Yeah.
It's like, so, because that's the story behind the Ningalese is he split them because he was tired of seeing the Shaolin principles go out the window so that people could line up these forms. And so he intentionally changed certain pieces to make sure that they could not be lined up. Though Master Graposo still knows the original way, which is kind of cool.
So, yeah, like you said, when we teach weapons kata, it is not Shaolin Kempo karate. It's usually either from another style or it's something an instructor made up after, like, studying the weapons principles and then just putting together a series of movements that make sense. Now, that being said, I do really like traditional weapons training, especially as a diagnostic tool for your own movement. So Master John Fritz, who was Ken's instructor, would nickname the bow staff a truth stick or a lie detector, depending on who he was talking to. But the idea is that there were certain drills you could do with the bow staff that would reveal deficiencies in your empty-handed art. And Master Dave Shirley, I know is famous for saying that the way to make a black belt a purple belt is by putting a weapon in their hands. So especially bow staff, I feel like it's a strong supplementary thing to train because it can tell you a lot about how you may be compensating for deficiencies in your own art. So even though you probably aren't going to be carrying kama around for self-defense or need to defend yourself against someone wielding a pair of sai, it is still good to train these things because, like you said, it can help your empty-handed art.
Yeah, and I think that's really the main point. I think, the only practical weapons besides a gun, are things like, the Eskrima sticks and the staff. Oh, or if you do some of the knife stuff, like Master Jesse Harding.
Yep.
And it's interesting that the Escrimas tend to sneak their way into just about every Kempo style. And I think it's because whether or not we came from Hawaiian lineage, most Kempo styles came from Hawaiian lineage, where there's a massive Filipino population.
Yep.
So a lot of the islanders, did train in Filipino stick fighting, or eskrima.
And that's one of the points I like to bring up, especially when we train eskrima at our school, is just that, like, of all of the weapons to train, if you were to find an object and pick it up, eskrima is most likely going to have the best, comparison, the best translation into being able to use that weapon effectively. Bow staff probably being the second. You kick the end off a mop and you have a bow staff. So I do think that eskrima especially, because you're training the fighting stick, but a lot of the movements are used for sword and blade. So you're training multiple things through practicing one set of movements. Oh, yeah. So there's just a raw efficiency in skill that you're developing.
I want to say, I don't know if it's the traditional way of saying it, but I know I've heard people refer to the Filipino arts, besides FMA, which I hear a lot, Filipino martial arts, but I also hear Filipino stick and knife.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a better description, because everything you do with the stick is designed to be done with a knife or done with a sword, which is why any of the stick sets you could do right-handed, left-handed, moving in the same direction, or opposite direction, or two-handed, and it's the same moves. And if you start doing the stick sets with two hands, you'll realize how much like sword they really look. It's pretty cool.
Well, and it is also good to remember that the Ninja Turtle weapons, besides the katana, all started as farming implements. So, yes, there are these elaborate martial arts that came out of it, especially if you go to the tournament side of things, but functionally, it was just learning how to maximize the effectiveness of just regular implements. And the other thing is, I was talking to Ken about this because recently we did an event where he taught Shaolin straight sword, and he said something which I thought was rang kind of true. Just there's only so many ways you can cut with a sword. Like, yes, there are different sword styles. If you change the weight or the guard or the length of the handle or the blade, like all single edge, double edge, these are all factors that can like change how you best use it. But at the end of the day, there's only so many ways you can apply leverage to cut an object, and just match the shape to the way that you're using it. So even though Kama is kind of a specific weapon, in the same way, the principle you're learning about striking and timing your power with a weapon where most of the weight is toward the end versus the handle. That's like there is a general application in learning how to study, that specific weapon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even like the really traditional guys will do forms with oars, where it's a lot like that, where there's a lot more weight on one end.
Yeah.
Because the oars, has the paddle on the other side. Jesse Enkamp, the karate nerd,
Yep.
has a great video about the Okinawan weapons, where he exposes the myth that they were farming tools.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And his thing was, some of them, you can make the argument like the bow staff being used for water on both sides. He said that legitimate. He said, but the sai in particular was a law enforcement tool in China. So and you can see like predating, karate, Chinese law enforcement holding these sais, except one handle would curve up and the other one would curve down.
Yeah.
But much like if anyone's ever watched Rob from New York compete with Sai.
Yep. He's got a pair.
He's got those those are really cool looking. And then I forgot what he said about nunchucks, because the old story was that it was used to beat wheat, and he was like, absolutely not. No one was beating wheat with nunchucks.
Well, what were they using it for?
I can't remember. I almost want to say a horse's bridle.
Oh, that would make sense.
But when he came down to it, he said that the myth was it was poor farmers, learning karate. But he said the poor weren't learning karate. He said it was the displaced rich, because karate, the martial arts were considered a very high society, elegant thing.
Yeah.
In the Ryukyu kingdom. So when mainland Japan came and said, "You're ours now."
Yeah. And
they displaced all these rich families. They were the ones that continued practicing.
Yeah.
Very, very cool video. He is a martial arts historian, and if you ever want to watch that whole thing, it's a pretty lengthy video, and he goes through a lot of the martial arts myths with weaponry and beyond.
So, diving a little deeper into each of the weapons, I thought it'd be interesting just to kind of go through some of the ones we teach and how they benefit your art. So for our school, no matter your rank or your age or your skill level, you always start with bow staff. And I think that with bow staff, first of all, it's teaching your relationship with the space around you. So it's not an edged weapon. You still need to be careful. You can seriously hurt somebody with it. It's also a stick. So before you have like a chain involved, like with nunchucks, or you have a simulated edge, like with Kama, you have this weapon that requires a lot of spatial awareness. So you have to learn the space around you, and the key thing is learning transference of power. And then split focus between the hands handling the weapon and your stance. Because it's so easy, as you watch it with beginners, they start learning how to slide their hands along the staff, and their stance almost comes immediately upright. So did you have anything to add with bow staff?
First and foremost, I don't know if you know this, but when I was living in Willimantic, I took out one of my ceiling lights.
I did not know that.
Doing my bow staff form.
Yeah.
So don't be like Dominic.
Yeah.
Ask your parents, or if you're an adult, train outside. There's a lot of stuff to hit.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that those exercises, like the ones you were talking about, where you keep the stick, perfectly parallel to the ground, and you bring it up and slide your hands together and bring it down.
Yep.
That is the ultimate shoulder workout.
Yeah.
I mean, I try and do that with my bow staffers, every bow staff class in Marlboro, and afterwards, I could see them rolling their shoulders, and I'm doing the same thing because it is just as much of a workout for me.
Yep.
In the shoulders as it is for them, which is good, and those are really good shoulder muscles to strengthen, to protect yourself. So I think just from a physical standpoint too, I think the nunchuck, weapons, not to scoot ahead because I know we're going to talk about nunchucks too, but bow staff is great for shoulders. Nunchucks are great for forearms and wrists.
Yeah.
They all have these really nice muscle systems that they target that I think is beneficial too.
Yeah, actually, Ken gave this. I don't know how much of it was just spur of the moment, but he said this on an adult test last night that I've been kind of chewing over, which is that fitness is physical command of self-perspective.
Yes, I don't understand it yet.
Yeah.
Because I saw it when you posted it, and I was like, that's very wisdomous.
Yeah.
I have no idea what it means.
Well, I think what it means is that oftentimes we think of perspective as a cognitive thing. And we separate that from our physical thing. So it's kind of like, I found out that your gut actually has brain cells in it. So when it's trust your gut, and your gut there's certain signals it's giving you. And a lot of times I find that, especially speaking to people, just in our culture, and I'm going to make this very broad sweeping statement, that a lot of times we try to divorce emotion, cognitive, and physical. So when we highly value the cognitive to dominate the emotional and the physical instead of bringing them into alignment. And I think a lot of times what fitness really helps you do, especially when you're being mindfully practicing fitness, is it gives you a command of the signals that your body is telling you that inform you of things that are both on and underneath the surface. Because how many times has a student gotten upset about something, and what they say they're upset about has a different root cause that you're trying to kind of diagnose.
Yep.
So I feel like in a lot of the same way, the weapons, like you were saying with bow staff, giving you a shoulder workout, nunchucks giving you a forearm wrist workout, by connecting your mind to different parts of your body, you're becoming sensitive to more signals and more information that now you can act on or make decisions for, or just notice, whichever. But a lot of times when we ignore our fitness, it causes these imbalances in our emotional and cognitive side of things.
Yeah, and I think the physical fitness at least becomes kind of a glue.
Yeah.
I've noticed because if I don't exercise, I noticed that my rational thinking and my emotional brain become so separated that I'm bouncing back and forth between the two and driving my wife crazy.
Right.
So yeah, that makes complete sense.
And on the other side, if you're doing a lot of reps with a lot of intensity and you're not paying attention, if you're doing too much physical without a cognitive overlay, then you hurt yourself, and that also affects your emotions and your So that's kind of my point, is it's hard to do one without the other. And I think weapons are a great way to really highlight where your attention should be. Yeah.
This is almost unrelated, but I saw something recently with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
And he was talking about all these guys that would be in this gym from the same periods of time he was.
Yeah.
He said they would come to the gym at the same time as me and leave at the same time as me, but they wouldn't get the same,
gains.
Yeah. And he said because they're looking around as they're doing their stuff and they're, not doing it, but he's he is emotionally invested and he is cognitively invested and physically invested in his task. Granted, I'm sure steroids helped, but but at the same time, it does make a lot of sense. And even when you're doing like not bench press, but like a bench press with barbells, barbell press. If you're just pushing up, you get certain gains, but if you're focusing on squeezing the chest muscles together as you come up, you get an entirely different workout.
Yeah.
So I feel like the three, that helps me. That helps me understand that quote.
Yeah.
From Ken Moore. So
bow staff. I think the main point of starting with it is it's first about awareness. Second, about learning how to efficiently transfer power. And third, to make sure that even if you have a weapon in your hands, that you're mindful of your stance. Mm-hmm. At our school next, we used to move on to nunchucks. The reason I didn't is because nunchucks were even more discouraging than bow staff for most students that tried it, because they're a highly specific weapon. Mm-hmm. There's like a lot of timing and coordination that you need, and a lot of times it looks simpler than it actually is. I have yet to have a student start nunchucks and then stick with it and be like, yeah, this is my weapon. Partially because nunchucks isn't my weapon. Like, I just have I have a hard time really getting excited about it because it's just not a good match. Mm-hmm. Kama, though, I think is really interesting because now it's not just about transferring power, it's about paying attention to weight. Because, like I said earlier, the weight distribution is different than bow staff. You have more weight on the end of the weapon. The other thing it helps you learn is how to transfer power with two hands independently. So, whereas with bow staff, especially the beginner bow staff form, both hands are on the bow staff at all times, and both hands are transferring power into one source. With Kama, the hands are independent, and you're oftentimes transferring power in two different directions. How much Kama have you done?
I've done the basic form.
Yeah.
Gotta be honest, never been my favorite weapon.
Yeah.
I've always been a nunchuck. So I can only speak to the nunchuck side of it. But as far as nunchucks go, if you choose to train nunchucks, you will have impressively massive gains in your forearms. If you don't know the connection, forearms are tied to grip strength.
Yeah.
So if you ever, let's say you're into the black belt degrees and you want to get more into Chana, practice nunchucks.
Yeah.
Because, that will give you an insane grip strength. And then the other thing it gives you is just an absolutely insane hand-eye coordination. Mm-hmm. Because, you're catching the nunchuck from different directions, usually, underneath your armpit, but sometimes even behind your back right in the form. So the amount of hand-eye coordination you need is pretty insane. So you develop a lot of interesting, neurological connections when you do nunchucks. So they're definitely frustrating, and it's easy to clonk yourself.
Yeah.
So I feel like if I had to say the top three, I would say forearm strength and grip strength, hand-eye coordination, and humility. Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. I do think there is, it's not exact, but there is some connection between the weapons and the animals. So I've viewed bow staff as kind of like a crane weapon, in the sense that, it's really mostly about your shape and how you use your shape to transfer power. And usually if there's something that's wrong, it's kind of shape related. I've always seen Kama as kind of like a tigery weapon, where it's about maximizing the amount of punch that you're getting in at the end, kind of like a tiger claw. And there's you kind of need some lat connection in order to get the Kama in. And then I've always thought of nunchucks as a leopard weapon, because like you said, with the coordination and the fact that a lot of times, because if you've got one nunchuck, you're switching sides a lot, you can sort of hide where the weapon is going to hit, and it hits in some creative ways. That being said, from conversations I've had with Ken, leopard, I think, there have been times he said it's the most difficult animal to pick up. I think from a cognitive perspective, I think that's still true. From a physical perspective, I think snake is also very, very difficult. I think tiger crane are the simpler ones, and leopard snake are the complex ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
But actually, in between kama and nunchucks, so usually we do kama at green belt, nunchucks at brown, and then at green stripe is where we allow students to do fan.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That used to be like, I think, a second-degree weapon when I started.
Yeah. And I talked it over because we had a lot of under black belt students just really, hungry for learning fan. And I talked it over with Ken. With the actual manipulation of the weapon, fan is less complex than nunchucks. Mm-hmm. You're not like switching hands a lot. Really, the complication comes into opening and closing the weapon. But even if you do the whole form with the weapon closed, really the form isn't about transferring power. It's about hitting clean lines. And so one of the reasons originally it was at secondary black belt is because there's a high demand of your body to get the stances correct. And usually it used to line up with shut-on qua, but as we've gone more and more years, really it's up to the student whether or not they're willing to do the conditioning for the form to look well. So there's nothing in the fan form that I think if you don't do the conditioning, it would be harmful, which I think was kind of the concern.
Yeah.
You can kind of there are some forms where if you don't do the conditioning correctly, they can kind of mess you up. But I don't think the fan form really falls in that category. But if you don't follow through on strengthening your body or forging the vessel, the form just isn't going to look good. So the green stripe tends to be the rank where you've demonstrated enough personal accountability where, we trust the fact that if you're going to learn fan and you want to do well, you're going to do the work in order to get there. So, yeah.
You know what's interesting? Well, with the exception of opening the fan, if you watch, old Chinese practitioners doing the fan, it resembles like elongated kung fu style Filipino stick fighting.
Yeah.
It's just because they don't open the fan all that often.
Right.
The form, even though I know Master Jenny added some extra opens for tournament purposes.
Yep.
The actual form doesn't have the fan open that often.
Yeah.
There's one section where the fan opens and it's small, and then the fan's shut for the majority of the form, and that's pretty true to how the fan was used. It's pretty cool to be able to open the fan to parry, and the samurai used blades in their fan, but a lot of times the forms that we're doing are more like the Kung Fu side, where they were using bamboo fans. Which I can only imagine what it feels like to get thwapped upside the head with a bamboo fan. I'm sure it's not fun. But yeah, so it's pretty cool. I bet if you learned Filipino stick fighting and then kind of implemented it with the fan, I bet you could come up with some cool stuff.
Well, I was told that if you replace the fan with a knife or a straight sword, to come back to how Filipino stick fighting teaches you multiple weapons at once, the fan form kind of does the same thing. And when I was 16, I thought I'd be snarky, and I asked Ken to teach me the fan form with a knife, and I did not realize how willing he was to do it, and I was like, ooh, this is kind of disturbing. And it's like, well, yeah, that's what you get for asking. But yeah, and all he did was add one or two little flourishes to kind of maximize the use of the weapon. But I've definitely done that form with a few different weapons, and it does kind of with the Eskrima stick, it does kind of make you appreciate how, even though the weapons are different, there are some similar principles that you're practicing just by learning, again, to go back to bow staff, just learning to pay attention to your relationship with the weapon and your relationship with the surroundings. That being said, I've always found that fan kind of leans more toward the crane, snake side of stuff. Not exactly one or the other, but kind of in that category. And then, so we got bow staff, and then kama, fan, nunchucks, which you talked about. Then at first degree is where we allow students to train sai. And the reason for that is because sai only really, they make aluminum and rubber sai, but it really only works if you've got some weight at the end. So when I teach a student, I prefer for them to train with the steel sai. And that, that if you want to talk about forearm workout, that'll do it.
Yeah.
So not only is there like a strength requirement, there's also a dexterity requirement, and like you said, the only holes we have poked in the mats are from me dropping sai. So, and they're not sharp, even though sometimes on Ninja Turtles, Raphael's has a pointed end. It's a blunt instrument, and just by dropping it, just the sheer weight of it can just thump a hole in the mats. So,
Yep.
yeah. So yeah, I think the main thing with sai is just the dexterity, and just the strength that's required. I think we're going back to more of a crane weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like its defensive capabilities. So I really like the fact that, resting on your forearm, it becomes like armor.
I do know that the latest addition since the event Ken taught is Shaolin's straight sword. And that's kind of like the gentleman's sword. And that one is all snake. Just the way that you leverage, the precision that's required, and the way that the end of the weapon kind of flicks out like the tongue of a snake. We're still in active discussion. My pitch was to start it at second degree with some of the more advanced principles at third degree. I always think it's not a bad idea to start someone with some drills. But yeah, that one is that is a very difficult weapon.
Yeah.
And the ones that we don't train that I would like to start filling in gaps are Chinese broadsword and spear. Because if you think about the four traditional Shaolin weapons, from my understanding, it goes bow staff, and then broadsword, spear, and straight sword. And so I think it would be cool to be able to take a student through the traditional Shaolin progression, even though we're not really teaching like Shaolin forms. The straight sword kata that he taught was definitely something he made up with just a lot of research and knowledge of principles passed down from his teacher. Because John Fritz was even one to be like, I can teach the principles of the weapon, but I'm not a big one on kata or a lot of different weapons forms.
Yeah. I haven't gotten to try that yet. I'm excited, though.
Dom and Johnny in the morning.